shall never forget the first time I laid these now tired old eyes on our visit. I had been left home by the family with the admonition, cautionary advice, to take care of the house until they returned. That's something they always say to me when they go out. Take care of the house, Harold. You're the watchdog. I think it's their way of making up for not taking me with them. As if I wanted to go anyway. You can't lie down at the movies and still see the screen. And people think you're being impolite if you fall asleep and start to snore. Or scratch yourself in public. No, thank you. I'd rather be stretched out on my favorite rug in front of a nice, whistling radio. But I digress. I was talking about that first night. Well, it was cold. The rain was pelting the windows. The wind was howling, and it felt pretty good to be indoors. I was lying on the rug with my head on my paws, just staring absently at the front door. My friend Chester was curled up on the brown velvet armchair, which years ago he'd staked out as his own. I saw that once again he'd cover the whole seat with his cat hair, and I chuckled to myself, picturing the scene tomorrow. Next to grasshoppers, there's nothing that frightens Chester more than the vacuum cleaner. In the midst of this reverie, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't even bother to get up and see who it was. I knew it had to be my family, the Monroes, since it was just about time for the movie to be over. After a moment, the front door flew open. There they stood in the doorway, Toby, Pete, Mom, and Dad Monroe. There was a flash of lightning, and in its glare I noticed that Mr. Monroe was carrying a little bundle, a bundle with tiny, glistening eyes. Pete and Toby bounded into the room. So, I'm going to freeze for one moment. Do we know anything about our characters yet? Who are our characters in this story? You can go back to your text to help you. Contrell, give me one of our characters.
Mom.
Mom. We got Mom. Very good. Who else? Aaron?
Dad.
Dad. Anybody else? Shylin? Chester. Now,
Toby.
mouths are so off. Silent hands are ready to answer questions. You have a voice off, hand up. Khaleesi's voice is off, her hand is up. Akaya's voice is off. Keon's voice is off. So, Shylin, you said Chester. What is Chester? Carrie, you're raising a silent hand. What's Chester? Say it loud. What makes you think he's a cat? Ah, he fills that chair up with cat hair, right? So maybe I'm going to put in parentheses here that Chester is a cat, just so we remember that as we're going through and getting more characters. Anybody else tonight? Toby. And who else? There's a few more. Elder?
A girl. Pete.
I don't know. Go back into your text. And if you think you know somebody else, give a silent hand with your bottom flat.
Pete.
Pete. And who's narrating? Who's currently narrating, Isaiah? Who's telling our story right now? Who's supposed to take care of the house, Isaiah? The dog, and he has a name. What's his name? Somebody giving me a silent hand. What is the dog's name, Sana? Harold. Also, somebody giving me a super silent scholarly hand. What point of view is this story being narrated from? And how do you know? What point of view? Kiki, why do you say first person? I see some silent agree signals. Huh? So they're saying the names of the other characters. What pronouns do we see? Zanaya? I. Right. I shall never forget the first time I laid eyes on our visitor. Very good. So we're going to keep reading. We're going to pick up on page 6. Talking at the top of their lungs, Toby shouted, "Put him over there, Dad! Take your boots off! You're soaking wet," replied his mother, somewhat calmly. I thought, under the circumstances. But, Mom, what about the fur stop dripping on the carpet? Would somebody like to take this? Asked Mr. Monroe, indicating the bundle with his eyes. I'd like to remove my coat. I will, Pete yelled. No, I will, said Toby. I found him. You'll drop him. I will not. You will too. Mom, Pete punched me. I'll take him, said Mrs. Monroe. Take off your coats this minute. But she became so involved in helping the boys out of their coats that she didn't take him at all. My tranquil evening had been destroyed, and no one had even said hello to me. I whimpered to remind them that I was there. "Harold!" cried Toby. "Guess what happened to me?" And then all over again, everyone started talking at once. At this point, I feel I must explain something. In our family, everyone treats everyone else with great respect for his or her intelligence. That goes for the animals as well as people. Everything that happens to them is explained to us. It's never just, "Good boy, Harold," or "Use a litter box, Chester," at our house. Oh no. With us, it's, "Hey, Harold, Dad got a raise and now we're in a higher tax bracket." Or, "Come sit on the bed, Chester, and watch this Wild Kingdom show. Maybe you'll see a relative." Which shows just how thoughtful they are. But after all, Mr. Monroe is a college professor, and Mrs. Monroe is a lawyer. So I think we think of it as a rather special household. And we are therefore rather special pets. So it wasn't at all surprising to me that they took the time to explain the strange circumstances surrounding the arrival of the little bundle with the glistening eyes now among us. Somebody giving me a sign here. What do you think is in the bundle? What do you think might be? Kiki?
Bunny.
Maybe a bunny. Eric, what is it?
I think
A what? A bucket? Now, not just the definition or what bundle means. What do you think they're holding, Eric?
They might be
You agree with Kiki? If so, you also agree with Kiki that it might be a rabbit, you can give me a silent agree signal. I'm going to take one more hand. If somebody thinks something different, raise a silent hand. Kian.
I think the cat, when she said the cat is scared, none but a raccoon. I'm talking about on this page.
Which page? Give me a number.
Number 4.
Okay.
When she said the cat is not scared of nothing but a raccoon, I think, why the cat not scared of, like when she said the door popped open, like, come on.
So, Kian, that's a really good question. I want to come back to that. So, but I am kind of continuing on about if you thought there was anything else besides maybe a rabbit that the Monroes have in that bundle. If not, I want to definitely come back to that question at a later time, all right? Okay, beautiful. So let's find out. It seems that they had arrived at the theater late, and rather than trip over the feet of the audience already seated, they decided to sit in the last row, which was empty. They tiptoed in and sat down very quietly so they wouldn't disturb anyone. Suddenly, Toby, who's the little one, sprang up from his chair and squealed that he had sat on something. Mr. Monroe told him to stop making a fuss and to move to another seat. But in an unusual display of independence, Toby said he wanted to see just what it was that he had sat on. An usher came over to their row to shush them, and Mr. Monroe borrowed his flashlight. What they found on Toby's chair was the little blanketed bundle that was now sitting on Mr. Monroe's lap. They now unwrapped the blanket, and there, in the center, was a tiny black and white rabbit. Yeah! Bring it back to zero. Voices are off. Danielle's voice is off. Karen's voice is off. Shyland's voice is off. Sitting in a shoebox filled with dirt. A piece of paper had been tied to his neck with a ribbon. There were words on the paper, but the Monroes were unable to decipher them because they were in a totally unfamiliar language. I moved closer for a better look. Now, most people might call me a mongrel, but I have some pretty fancy bloodlines running through these veins, and Russian Wolfhound happens to be one of them. Because my family got around a lot, I was able to recognize the language as an obscure dialect of the Carpathian Mountain region. Roughly translated, it read, "Take good care of my baby." But I couldn't tell if it was a note from a bereaved mother or a piece of Romanian sheet music. The little guy was shivering from fear and cold. It was decided that Mr. Monroe and the boys would make a house for him out of a gold crate and some heavy-duty wire mesh from the garage. For the night, the boys would make a bed for him in the shoebox. Toby and he ran outside to find the crate, and Mrs. Monroe went into the kitchen to get him some milk and lettuce. Mr. Monroe sat down, a dazed expression on his eyes, as if he were wondering how he came to be sitting in his own living room, in a wet raincoat with a strange bunny on his lap. I signaled to Chester, and the two of us casually moseyed over to the corner of the room. We looked at each other. So, what happened to the Monroes when they went to the movie theater? Ellen.
A bunny that jumped off. A bunny was on the seat when Toby saw him they jumped on his dad's lap.
Did it jump on his dad's lap?
It was sitting on.
Well, it's now sitting on dad's lap, right?
What?
Can.
Why make his house out of an old crate and a shoebox?
That's an interesting question. We might find that out as we continue to read tonight. Yeah, what happened? So Elder said that rabbit was on Toby's seat. What else happened? They decided that they were going to keep it. So, right now, where's the setting in our story? Where have we left off right now on page 10? Danielle, where's the setting? If you think you know the setting too, you can give a silent thumbs up until we need some help. Parents giving a silent thumbs up. Elders checking the text. Police put your books. So they were at the movie theater, but where are they now, Danielle? Oh, at home. Beautiful. Our setting is at home currently. Take another round. And our events so far. So, Elder, you told us the Monroes, so Mom, Dad, Toby, and Pete, went to the movie theater, right?
Yes.
Next, what happens? Just to refresh. Elder, you answered this the first time. Patrick, what happens at the movie theater? Elder told us this already, but I want to get it to repeat it. They're at the movie theater. What happens? You can go back in your text. See, some scholars are already going back. What was in his seat, Patrick? love how you use those adjectives to describe that rabbit. They find the rabbit. What do they decide?